All right, we're going to get started. The last session of the day. It's my pleasure to introduce Christy Monaco, the Chief Ventures Officer and Director of the Office of Ventures and Innovation at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. She'll be talking about from consumer to producer, how public sector data is fueling innovation. And I do ask, just like the last session, when we start the Q&A, if you could cue behind one of the two microphones, it makes it easier for us on stage. Thank you. Okay. Christy?
Thanks, Doug. How many people here thought they were coming to hear Dr. Anthony Vinci speak? Yeah, I'm not Anthony. If you guys are paying attention to NGA's press releases, you know by now that Anthony is leaving us to pursue new opportunities in the private sector. So when we didn't want to leave AWS hanging, and they said, well, who can fill in for Anthony? And they said, how about our second sassiest Italian? So you've got me. What I was going to do today was spend a little time talking about what is the Office of Ventures and Innovation. And then I'm going to go into what we're doing with our public-private partnership in particular with some geospatial data, give you guys a quick demo of our GeoWorks platform, and hopefully have some time for questions at the end. So hopefully that sounds good. One of the things so the Office of Ventures and Innovation stood up back in October. We were announced as a new office within the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency at the GeoInt Symposium in 2017. And it took us a while to actually get everything together and stand ourselves up. We stood up in the fall. And one of the things we did as a group was to try to determine, okay, what actually is it that NGA needs us to be? So we did a little customer discovery, walked around, talked to folks, figured out, talked to Anthony, talked to NGA leadership. And what we decided was that what NGA needs out of us is, as opposed to something like a skunk works type organization where you separate your agency innovators from the rest of the agency, what the agency really needed was a group to help forge partnerships, pathways, and solutions to help improve existing, invent new, and imagine transformational GeoInt capabilities. In other words, what we do in the Office of Ventures and Innovation is help agency innovation along. We don't do a lot of innovation ourselves, with one exception, and that's the GeoWorks demo I'm going to give you at the end of this. And really what we're doing here is recognizing that alongside NGA's operational imperative, we've got operational missions that we have to take care of, we also have an innovation imperative. And that is that we have to constantly refresh and renew GeoInt capabilities in order to maintain the nation's GeoInt advantage over that of our adversaries. So that's why we're there and trying to help the agency both do better with the missions for today and position ourselves for tomorrow's missions. We have basically 4 lines of business. And I usually refer to them in the order that I'm going to give them to you because I'm going to start with sort of our more traditional line of business, but it is not a traditional line of business for an Office of Ventures and Innovation. And that is our component acquisition executive staff. If you've been paying attention to NGA, you may have picked up that Justin Poole, our deputy director, has recently been designated NGA's component acquisition executive. Well, he needs a staff to enable him with that responsibility. So keeping in mind that if you are acquiring a new capability, it is because you're probably trying to do something better, bring a new capability in and innovate. We thought, hey, it could be kind of innovative in and of itself to align the component acquisition executive staff with the Office of Ventures and Innovation. So what those folks essentially do is look out for the acquisition workforce and make sure that those folks have the skills and abilities to do the job, and also do acquisition governance. A couple things that have recently happened sort of structurally at NGA is that we've changed some of how we organize ourselves in a way to better set ourselves up for success in bringing new capabilities on. So the 3 developments in my mind that happened were, first, we we've restructured NGA's programs. We used to have a lot of what we called programs of record that were very contract centric. So if you had a contract, it was a program. What we've done since then is move to a more, we call them big chunky programs that are very outcome based. Things like analytic modernization as a big chunky program. Things like foundation geo and modernization, a big chunky program. We've established these big chunky programs that are outcome based and basically pulled together what were previously tiny programs. That allows us to do a better job with accountability, identifying capabilities that may be complementary or in fact redundant, and just manage our resources in a more holistic fashion. At the same time, Tanya Pemberton over in our CIO and IT management directorate she and her leadership team have set up what we're calling the integrated program offices. And those integrated program offices will be aligned to the big chunky programs. So you've got sort of a resource organization. You've got this new integrated program office organization that brings together folks from around NGA with interests in those areas. So it's not just your traditional PM structure, but we're bringing in mission owners from analysis and source. We're bringing in security folks, bringing in legal folks. OVI will have innovation referents to each of the integrated program offices. So really approaching this from an integrated perspective and doing a better job with concepts like product management. So big chunky programs, establishing the IPOs, and then I like to think of OVI as being part of the revolution and sort of how NGA is organizing ourselves in order to do a better job with acquisition. OVI's second line of business are I'm going to talk about two of our lines of business because they relate really well to each other. We are big adherents to the concepts of lean startup. And so I have one group of folks who are responsible for essentially understanding what we have laid out as like a lean innovation pipeline. It's the model through which NGA optimally brings new capabilities in, from innovation sourcing to problem curation to requirements to, I'm trying to remember all the 6 phases, solution and hypothesis testing, incubation, and integration. Understanding what NGA has going on in each of those phases and what might we do for innovation sourcing? Who might we look to for innovation sourcing? How might we go through problem curation? The valley of death is that adoption phase, moving from a solution hypothesis testing to integration. How can we help people across that acquisition valley of death? I've got one group of people who are responsible essentially for maintaining awareness of all the means that are in that acquisition pipeline. They also are responsible directly for some of the means in that acquisition pipeline. So things like hackathons and challenges and cooperative R&D agreements or CRADAs, other transaction authority agreements, OTAs. Some of those sorts of more novel acquisition means are functionally aligned to OVI. So we're out kind of proselytizing about those capabilities and making people aware that, hey, rather than going through a traditional procurement, you might want to consider an OTA instead. The group that relates to them is a group that I think of as being kind of caddies. And they are there, and bear with me on the caddy analogy, but if you think about what a caddy does, they're walking alongside the golfer. They understand the terrain. They understand where the wind is blowing. They understand the golfer and their swing. They understand what's in the golf bag, but they're not actually swinging the club themselves. They're there to advise the golfer. That's essentially what this group of folks is doing, is they are helping the agency's innovators through that innovation pipeline and advising them, hey, for your problem, the next thing you might want to do is go try this route, or you might want to go to an OTA, you might want to try a CRADA. So helping those agency innovators through that through that process. One of the things we recently did was sort of did a data call and said, all right, NGA, how many pilots and prototypes do you have out there? How many projects are out there that kind of predated the existence of OVI? And we got 155 pilots and prototypes. What this group of folks is now doing is basically identifying, okay, who are the POCs for each of those pilots and prototypes? Where are they in that acquisition pipeline, and how can we help them get through? Because some of them we will want to integrate, but some of them we may say, oh, you know what, we learned and it's time to retire this. The group that does this also, incidentally, the group that is responsible for helping people through the pipeline is also responsible for something we're pretty proud of called the NGA Innovation Experience. And that is an annual kind of a contest to say, hey, open agency-wide, if you have a project, if you have an idea for something to improve, nominate it. There's a down select process. We take the teams that are selected by agency leadership to participate, run them through basically kind of like a startup accelerator, and then they pitch their projects to NGA's venture board, which is essentially the ability to give those folks the time they need, which is really more often what they're looking for, but also some financial resources for things like they may need developers, they may need licenses for particular capabilities, they may need access to coaching. That venture board actually is meeting on Thursday, so I'm pretty excited about that. It'll be our second time we've given away resources, the third time the venture board has met. It's awful fun to sit in a room and get to play like you're on Shark Tank. We're not much nicer than the sharks, though. And then the last line of business for OVI is a group of folks that are very kind of outwardly focused, and they're around a number of different functions. First off, the small business office, who have turned out to be a really interesting node in that bringing together of sort of the traditional acquisition and procurement functions with the innovation functions. A lot of what NGA is doing these days are trying to reach into small businesses and startups, and the small business office is really helping us with that, with making that easier for those kinds of companies. I also have a group of folks called, that we refer to as the Outposts. We have two outposts. One is in San Francisco. We actually have space in downtown San Francisco, and we also sit in the AWS center down in Cupertino. So we've got kind of both ends of Silicon Valley bracketed. And they're there to do technology scouting, talent scouting, and what I think of as sort of transformation scouting. They're looking for kind of what works in Silicon Valley, what business practices are succeeding there, and how might we adopt those sorts of practices at NGA. They're also frankly proving that there is value in having a group of folks who can operate almost entirely unclassified. There are still some things that they have to do on our high-side systems. Unfortunately, all of our personnel systems and the place where we request travel all resides on our top secret network. But for the most part, those folks don't need access to the high side in order to contribute value to NGA. It's a really important lesson for us to learn as our business becomes more commercialized. I have another gentleman in the office named Rick Meilenbeck. He is our industry innovation advocate. Kind of similar function to the Outpost, so I kind of sometimes refer to him as our in-post, but he sits with us at our headquarters in Springfield and is there as a point of entry for industry. And then lastly, we've got our public-private partnership. Have anybody heard about what NGA is doing with our public-private partnership? This was a concept that was announced at the GeoInt Symposium in 2017. And as part of the stand-up of OVI, we've been standing up the public-private partnership. As originally envisioned, we were going to stand up a 501c3 sort of a corporation. And the idea is, in fact, I was over at the JPL talk and I saw a bullet on the gentleman's slide that said something along the lines of, like, your value is in your data. You know, we've all heard data is the new oil. Well, we recognize that we're sitting on a ton of geospatial data that is very, very valuable for the purposes of doing things like training AI algorithms. So the public-private partnership is essentially there to find ways to give outside entities access to NGA's data. And at this point, I'm going to tether myself a little bit to the podium, and I promise I hope the slides are exciting. There are a lot of clicks, so bear with me. So we really need, the driving reason behind the establishment of the public-private partnership is that our future is dependent on the use of automation, AI, and augmentation, or what we refer to as AAA. We need these technologies in order to keep up with the data and succeed in our mission, because we are already drowning in that data. The proliferation of government and especially commercial sensors has meant a flood of new data for NGA. So if you think of all the government-owned satellites and all the government-owned airborne sensors, the FMV systems, all the WAMI capabilities, and then on top of all those, you add this burgeoning field of commercial sensors. To take one example, Planet is striving for daily coverage of the entire planet. That is an unbelievable amount of data for us to deal with. So the avalanche of sensors and data is really a kind of a godsend, in my opinion, for NGA, because it does promise a future where we can significantly increase our ability to provide decision maker advantage and secure the nation. However, getting to that point means that we must first develop the capability to take advantage of all that data. And we're not going to be able to do so by hiring additional analysts. Our director has noted that every day in just one combat theater with a single sensor, we collect the data equivalent of 3 NFL seasons, every game, and high definition. There's just no possible way that we're going to be able to hire enough analysts to just look at WAMI, let alone other sensors. And triage and prioritization isn't the answer either. We tend to try triage as our default strategy, whether by prioritization or frankly not looking at historical data at all. So in order to help us drive forward, NGA's director, Robert Cardillo, has set out a vision for us to apply AAA to 75% of the agency's workflows in the coming years. In the commercial sector, when you look at tech companies like Google or Apple, for instance, it's clear that they realize that their data is their primary asset. Apple was willing to pay $400 million for the data in the Shazam app alone. And Google's hosted Gmail for free for years because of the amount of data that they can collect off that platform. All of the data that we in the GeoInt enterprise have access to is our asset, and it is what's going to allow us in our efforts to deliver when and what our customers need. In fact, we have a duty to figure out how to extract as much data, as much value as possible from the data for our warfighters and decision makers. And yet, the heady days of increasing intelligence budgets seem behind us. So we're left with a problem, and that is how to take advantage of all this data without hiring more intelligence analysts and other GeoInt specialists. So technology is clearly the key. Computer vision and machine learning are the only way that we will be able to keep up. We must adopt these technologies in order to succeed. That is the promise, and I think it's closer than we think. In fact, at the GeoInt Symposium a few months ago, Robert laid out another goal for NGA, and this one's a pretty stretchy goal for us. We're going to apply AAA to every image we ingest by the end of this year. Thankfully, not the fiscal year, end of 2018. I'm going to point out, frankly, that rules-based software is not going to get us there. We're going to need to rely on a new crop of artificial intelligence capabilities, in particular machine learning and deep learning and related capabilities and approaches. However, as it turns out, the vast majority of experts in these approaches now work in private sector and don't have security clearances. Decades ago, in the 80s, up until the 1980s, the government had the lead in R&D, but starting in the mid-80s, we kind of lost that edge, in a way driving the field not just around the Beltway, but in essence creating Silicon Valley to help. Most expertise lies in commercial companies and research universities. If we're going to succeed with those technologies, we simply must work with commercial industry and uncleared experts. NGA has been making strides in doing just that. As I mentioned earlier, we have our Outpost in San Francisco. And we're trying to make it as easy as possible for small companies to work with us through the adoption of OTAs and similar approaches. And in fact, one of the things that we're working on in OVI is creating something that we're calling our Hard Problems Roadshow. The idea here is that we're going to go to the nation's innovation centers around the country and bring some of our users, the folks who are living with kind of the challenges of doing GeoInt on a day-to-day basis, and putting them with like CTO types and saying, hey, have a mind meld and try to figure out what commercial use cases might apply to our GeoInt use cases, because there are a lot of analogs out there. You think about what hedge funds are doing. You think about what commercial GeoInt is doing. You think about what the oil and gas industry is doing. Sometimes we're looking at problems in kind of a similar fashion, reaching out to those non-traditional partners. Our approach with working with commercial industry and using this new crop of AI and automation technology is what's going to get us where we need to go. We can exploit all that data so that we can create the best possible GeoInt products for our warfighter and decision maker customers. So in looking for new ways to partner with the private sector and to squeeze even more value out of the historical data that I mentioned that we've got petabytes of historical data. We're going to set up, or we've set up this public-private partnership concept to exchange NGA's data for technology with industry. So in April, we launched the GeoWorks website. I'll give you the website address at the end of this, but it's www.nga-geoworks.com. And it's a platform to basically do three things: to access NGA's data, to use advanced data science tools and build something with that data, and then it's a platform for launching things like hackathons and challenges, where participants in GeoWorks can show us what they've done with our data, and we can use that as a means of on-ramping that technology into NGA. So this becomes what we hope is a much easier way to interact with NGA and to interact with our data. And any US company, small or large, or academics, or even just individuals, are going to be able to gain access to our data and tools and build something. So I'm going to run you through it's not a live demo, it's slide demo, so you can kind of get a sense of what GeoWorks is all about. So first, when you go to the GeoWorks landing page, we've used login.gov for our identity management. So if you have a login.gov account, you can go, you can use that account, or you can create a login.gov account for yourself. You create a profile. One of the things we ask there is what your interests are. And then, interestingly enough, coming up with the terms of use for GeoWorks was a really interesting exercise for NGA. Right now, as written, we ask that only US persons, meaning US citizens or companies, access GeoWorks. That's something that we may change in the future, because this could also be a great platform for partners to engage with us. You scroll through the terms of use, and you click on the Continue to GeoWorks, and it takes you to essentially inside the site. And as I mentioned, we've got the three main functions there. On the data side, you can go into the data side. We've got a bunch of different, we've organized the data by function, and there are right now about 24 NGA data sets in there, plus a number of public and open data sets. We're planning on adding more data sets in the near future to include some historical declassified imagery at some point. So this is when you go into the data. This is kind of what the data looks like and how it's organized. When you go to the tools section, We've got a GeoInt viewer, and here are a couple screenshots of that GeoInt viewer, Geospatial Viewer. And then we also have the data science capability that leverages, we partnered with MITRE Corporation for this part of the website, and it leverages MITRE's Symphony platform through which we are making available Jupyter Notebooks and TensorFlow. One of the things we are asking for from our users is provide us feedback on what other tools would be useful for these purposes. We've also created an opportunities page, and this is, as I mentioned, where we are launching hackathons and challenges. The Geo Hack and Hunt challenge right now is something we did in partnership with SoftWorks. It's ongoing through the end of this month, so still time to join the Geo Hack and Hunt. And I will say, I mentioned that in the Office of Ventures and Innovation, we don't do a lot of innovation ourselves. This was something that we innovated on. This is really not just a new website. For us, it's a new way of doing business. The idea of using a hackathon or a challenge as the competitive element to potentially the award of an OTA is a really new business model for us. I mean, traditionally hackathons and challenges, you can offer a prize, and we've participated in hackathons and we've sponsored hackathons and challenges where we do offer a prize. But wouldn't it be great if instead of just a $25K or however many dollars we append to that hackathon or challenge, you don't just get the prize, but you get a relationship with NGA, you get a contractual relationship with NGA. And are folks familiar with OTAs, other transaction authority agreements? They are they're for rapid acquisition of prototypes or pilots with non-traditional industry partners. And if you compete an OTA, and the competition requirement can be light, it can be something like this. If you compete it up front, if you decide to scale that pilot or prototype and integrate it, you don't have to compete it. Now, this is kind of a new business model, particularly for many of our more traditional contractors who can participate in OTAs if they partner with a non-traditional commercial entity. This is similar to what DIUX is doing. They have their commercial solutions opening. That's essentially leveraging other transaction authority. Here's the website address. I do want to mention that we used agile approaches to developing this site. We went from concept to full steam ahead in less than 8 weeks. The site itself is powered by AWS, who was a fantastic partner for us in this. I will say they say it's a beta, and they say if you aren't embarrassed by your beta, you waited too long to launch. We launched it. We had to take some functionality down because we had a couple of oops. So right now, the functionality that is live on GeoWorks is the Geospatial Viewer and the challenges. We're working on getting the data and the Symphony platform back up and running as quickly as we can. But essentially what you can do is go in, sign up for this, and we're staying in touch with our customers to let them know, hey, here's what's going on, and when it goes back live, we'll have a blast that basically says, all right, the functionality is back. So to wrap up, if you agree with me that we are drowning in data and that automation and AI are the right available technologies, then you know we must work with commercial industry to get these technologies. These AI systems are going to be central to our intelligence process. We're going to use them at every level at NGA, not just for business or not just for mission applications, but for business applications as well. And I imagine that in the very near future, it's going to be hard to imagine doing GeoInt analysis without leveraging AI, similar to how if we said, oh, you'd have to do GeoInt analysis without a computer. I mean, people would be like, what? That's crazy. I think we're getting there with AI in the very near future. I think it's I think assuring our AI future is going to require close working partnerships between the government and commercial industry because, as I said, we're going to be reliant on commercial imagery to develop those technologies because we just aren't going to be able to do it ourselves. We're going to be able to do some of it ourselves, but this is going to need to be kind of a whole of nation effort. We're going to need data science tools, we're going to need data science and AI experts, and I think that's going to become the nature of the game. So that's all I've got, unless there are any questions. Microphone, please.
This was fascinating. How do we get other government agencies to kind of follow this model, especially if you think of organizations that are not as mission critical or more support or acquisition oriented or logistics and not so exciting as NGA? How do we develop this culture of innovation and fostering
So, excellent question. You know, I like to think that that NGA and most organizations don't suffer from a lack of innovation. They suffer from a lack of kind of the structure and processes of an ecosystem that helps foster that innovation. I mean, everybody who has a workaround for something in their job has innovated. So what we really need to do as leaders inside the government is figure out how do we empower folks to basically bring those workarounds forward and say, hey, here's a capability that I need. This is something I could do better. There is a fantastic and growing group of government innovators who we have a Slack channel. I mean, it's a really fascinating kind of ecosystem in and of itself of people who are trying to figure out how can we do better with innovation inside the federal government. I'd be happy to link you up with them. And then if there are folks who are interested in partnering on a capability similar to GeoWorks, see me afterward and I can put you in touch with the folks we'd be happy to share lessons learned or even make you part of the platform.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hello.
I had a question about the challenges that you have on GeoWorks.
Uh-huh.
Are they designed around specific needs at NGA, or are they more open-ended?
They are designed around specific needs. In fact, one of the things we're doing is going through with our hard problems and saying, all right, which of these hard problems could be issued as a challenge or a hackathon. But the beauty of GeoWorks is that it's not limited to working on hackathons or challenges. While the data is not, while users from GeoWorks won't be able to extract the data off the site, what they can do is innovate and just do something interesting with the data using the tools on the platform. And it might just be sort of bringing a technology forward and saying, hey, I did this cool thing with your data. Are you interested in it? There's an element to GeoWorks that's sort of in our backlog, which is, I think of it as the brag about it section, the fourth element of GeoWorks, which would be kind of a brag about it or share what you've done as a way of helping the community, the GeoWorks community, bounce off each other ideas and approaches.
Yeah, I was just curious if it was more I mean, I guess for the more need-based challenges, you have the option to contract as an incentive. For here's what we got. Let's see what you can do. What beyond is it just to share?
So so one of the things we are kind of some of the stuff that will be going on behind the scenes is we'll be watching because there's a compute cost. We're essentially footing the bill for the compute that people are using when they tap into the Symphony platform. But by watching who's using that compute, we can start to say, hey, it looks like you're doing some interesting stuff with our data. Perhaps you might be interested in partnering with us in a more formal capacity, like a CRADA, and get access to our classified data, to our maybe our non-publicly relatable or releasable unclassified data, or even some of our classified data, in order to do some really interesting things and solve some really hard challenges with the data. So we're essentially using this as kind of a market discovery platform.
Okay, thank you very much.
In the back?
Does this work? I'm interested in language translation capabilities, such as, I don't know if that could be applied to artificial intelligence, but I know that's obviously a growing industry. Do you have any thoughts on that? Does that in any way interact with what you're doing?
I could certainly see, just riffing on that, I could certainly see where leveraging some Internet of Things and geospatially locating, think in a cross-intelligence discipline function. Language translation, it tends to be sort of the domain of the NSA. But when you go, all right, what might we do? Everything that happens on the Earth happens at a lat long and a point in time. And the ability to bring together maybe a data set that has traditionally been aligned to SIGINT or HUMINT and or even OSINT and geospatial information, I think there's certainly some opportunity there in that multi-int or all-source functionality. But for the most part, natural language or language translation is not something we at NGA get into. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the day.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
This was great.
Thanks.
Now I'd like to invite you all for our reception outside. Thank you for joining us for our first Earth and Space Day. Thank you.